Thank you for listening to Tornado Talk. We have a special opportunity for you while it lasts. Get an Eton AM/FM emergency weather radio for just $25. That's 50% off and includes delivery, plus 2 free Tornado Talk koozies. This special deal is for you only at tornadotalk.com. Look for it online at tornadotalk.com.
This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
A tornado that was so big, it was hard to tell exactly what it was from a distance.
The size of it, and the sound of it. And what I'll never forget is not really knowing how big this thing really is.
A community scrambled for shelter, their lives suddenly in danger.
Wayne was real lucky in that regard that they didn't get a direct hit.
Some lose nearly everything.
Then we started coming up out of the basement, and I kind of looked over to the right, and something didn't look right over there. The four-placed hangar was totally gone.
And there were people helping people with a miraculous story of survival.
There were a ton of people that ended up saving my life in ways great and small, and I mean that sincerely.
This is Tornado Talk. What happened in Wayne? An outbreak of tornadoes in early October 2013 across eastern Nebraska and northwestern Iowa. There were 5 tornadoes rated EF2 and 2 classified as EF4. One of those in northwestern Iowa, the other in hardest hit Wayne, Nebraska on October 4th of that year. 15 people were hurt. It was the first EF4 tornado in Nebraska since 2004.
Alex Sheets is a teaching assistant at Texas Tech University. Alex was storm chasing on Thursday, October 3rd, 2013. Gulf moisture was streaming into the plains ahead of a classic clash of the seasons.
There was a little bit of a risk as well, like near Lincoln, which is where I'm from and where I went to school at. So I chased that day a little bit, and I actually saw 2 tornadoes that night. It was like after the sun went down and stuff, and it was near Hickman area. It was a 5% tornado risk on SPC, and I thought that was a good risk before, like the day before the day type of thing. I chased over there just to see what would happen, and I actually saw a pretty good supercell.
Brian Smith is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Omaha. He described the contrast in weather systems that created a perfect severe storm setup on the next day, October 4th, 2013.
It was a pretty darn good cyclone that was coming out into the plain state. It created blizzard-like conditions out in the panhandle of Nebraska, and we had severe weather in the east, which sometimes happens, and especially in those fall to early winter type storms, where we can get severe weather in the east or southeast part and winter weather in the west. But warm front was moving northward into northeast Nebraska.
James Wilson works at an engineering company in Kansas City where he designs power plants. In his downtime, he chases storms. James and his team decided to head north into Nebraska on that early October day in 2013 because the outlook from the Storm Prediction Center looked favorable.
The SPC had issued a moderate risk, and there was a 10% patch for tornadoes up in basically northwest Iowa. So that day, there had been an MCS, which kind of complicated stuff a little bit, but we expected it to clear. We expect warming. So we decided to head up 29 towards Sioux City. As we're going along there, we originally figured we'd go towards the triple point, and I was really wanting an October tornado, which I hadn't got before, so that was my main motivation. It was a very odd day in timing for us. We had a lot of obstacles to overcome, and it ended up being we got on the tornado in perfect timing. But as we're heading up 29, there was a car fire, which blocked 29 northbound completely. So we were there probably at least 30 minutes waiting for them to clear that out. But that kind of gave me a time to look at stuff a little bit more. And I noticed that the instability profile, everything was looking really good in northeast Nebraska. And I noticed that there was a bow in the cold front. So the idea of heading to the triple point, just with that bow and everything, I was figuring, well, the storms are going to fire right on that probably. So let's let's head that way. So we finally got through, and as we're heading kind of northwest towards the general Wayne-Hilger area, storms started firing right up where we expect them to. We saw this one cell, and we're like, that's going to be the strong one. We're going to head for that one. So we really started trying to haul to get there. And then just as we got close to it, we had met up with a flagman. There was construction. The road was completely closed again, and there was no way to get off the highway where we were, because we were the very first car. So we waited, which seemed like forever, for the pilot car to finally come. And as we're sitting there, we could see the storm in the distance, but there's a hill, so we can't see the base. It goes tornado warned, and there's a report of a tornado already on the ground. It was agonizing moments there, waiting for this pilot car that's probably going 20 miles an hour to get us around the flagmen and the construction. But once again, the timing ended up being perfect, because we went up 15 a little bit and then started heading west and come over the top of the hill, and we got the multi-vortex beginning of Wayne. Now, we kind of watched that for a minute, and the lessons of El Reno came into my head. That was all fresh in everybody's mind. It had just been a few months earlier. And seeing this large area, and with parameters and everything, I was like, let's go ahead and turn around. Let's go back to the highway, get on a paved road, stay off these muddy roads, and just hope this thing, goes in front of us. So we did that, and it ended up that the tornado, instead of going northeast, it was going a little more northeast. So it kind of stayed on or along 15 for quite a while. So we went up beside it, and we're watching this ghost train. This jet is just incredible, and we're probably maybe a quarter mile, half mile from it, roughly. I don't know exactly. We might have been a little bit closer, but we're watching it come right behind this house. Luckily, it didn't hit it, but this ghost train is just flying in, and I see it coming towards us. I'm like, turn around. And we got turned around in time, but the winds hit us pretty good. And I'm guessing they were probably 75-mile-an-hour winds, maybe 100. It was pretty intense winds. And I was worried we were going to lose, windows or something like that. But actually, one chaser, Adam Lucio, did end up losing, I believe, a rear window, because it picked up debris, probably rock or something, and hit the windows. So we watched the tornado from there. When we turned around, it ended up giving me, in the passenger navigator seat, a better view of the tornado. So I was able to film it. You could really see how big it was getting. And then it still had a form then. It hadn't got its largest extent, and it hadn't got where it was so low that you really couldn't see or make out the tornado itself at this point. So we turned back around, headed north, and we watched it cross the road in front of us. And at this point, it's so large, you can't even tell if this whole thing is the tornado, if it's getting rain or what's going on. But it still had that persistent ghost train, a little white streak along the bottom of it, right at ground level.
In a blog, Skip Talbot wrote after tracking the Wayne, Nebraska tornado, he and a group of storm chasers coined the term ghost train. Much like James Wilson, he describes it, quote, a focused jet of wind and mist within the rear flanking downdraft, unquote. He continues to say that given its size and motion, the moving wall of mist looked like a freight train to him, quote, a ghostly gray freight train, unquote.
Brian Smith at the National Weather Service in Omaha was on duty that day and watching the severe weather unfold.
There were several supercells that developed, some that developed out to the northwest of Wayne, and those produced brief tornadoes. And there was also another supercell that further southeast in Thurston County, which also produced tornadoes, and then went into northwest Iowa and southeast South Dakota. So the Wayne storm developed rather quickly. Tornadoes started in actually right near the Stanton County, Wayne County border, and moved northeast. Became very wide pretty quickly, and then crossed Nebraska Highway 15. Right where it's crossing 15, it strengthened quite a bit. Hit some homes south of Wayne, and then moved into the industrial area on the east side of Wayne, which is mainly warehouse buildings.
We started encountering damage at that point. There was a couple houses. It looked like maybe around EF3 damage or something. It wasn't off the foundations or anything, but there was a propane tank sitting there that was punctured. There was some other chasers coming up, so we decided to get out of there for our own safety. I don't really know what would happen if that thing went or if it would even go, but I didn't want to be around it. So we continued on into Wayne, by then, the tornado had gone through the town, and luckily it just skirted to the southeast of town.
Then continued northeast for quite some time and then eventually dissipated, but the worst of it was from about Highway 15 to about the airport is the strongest of the damage that we saw. There was a concern that it was going to hit Wayne itself, and I had been on the phone with the emergency manager in Wayne County telling him that this tornado may hit Wayne. And he had spotters already out, and the warning was out way ahead of time for the county and for Wayne itself. Luckily, the center part of the town did not get hit, and it was mainly a few homes on Highway 15, the north-south road that goes into Wayne, that got hit bad. And then especially hit the industrial park area really bad, and the airport.
Next to the airport is where Jim and Sandy Hoffman live. For 6 years, the married couple lived in Marnie, Iowa. Just 2 weeks earlier, they decided to relocate and accept a job taking care of maintenance for the Wayne Municipal Airport.
I guess the day of the tornado is about 5:30 in the afternoon. We was uptown, came back, noticed that the weather's pretty bad. My wife, Sandy, had heard that there was a tornado down 5 miles southeast of Wayne.
And that come across the radio that I had on.
So we came to the house. There was 2 other gentlemen working in our terminal over here. We were about a week away from moving in the new terminal when the tornado hit. So they were doing some electrical work over there. We told them about the tornado, and they said they'd be fine where they was at. There's a retainer wall in there that they could go by. We came on into the house, went to the basement, and we weren't down there probably 2 minutes when the tornado hit. And it took the house off right at ground level. There was about 2 rows of block above ground. It took all those, and I assume that one of those block hit me in the head. I had 12 stitches, and they said it was cut to the bone. When we were in the basement, my wife said that she heard the windows going, and just like that, I said, we just lost the house because it got bright out.
They always say when there's a tornado coming, you hear this loud, like a freight train coming. We did not hear that at all. I could see the windows through the stairway, that it was lightning and thunder, and I just felt like I needed to get closer to Jim, so therefore I went over, and he was sitting in a recliner. I just kind of knelt alongside of him and rolled over the armchair and pulled a quilt over me. And anyway, I said to him, I said, there goes all the windows in our house, because it just sounded like every single window shattered. I just no more than said that, and he said, there goes our house. And we had sky above us, just like that. We couldn't get out of the basement steps because it was just like somebody stirred everything up in the basement. And so he climbed on the chair and stepped up on the ground and then helped me up. My concern was to get him to the hospital. We never really looked around to see what we had all lost. I just wanted to get him to a hospital. And so, we did walk to the road. The sheriff took us up there. They never, ever did find like the stove, refrigerator, washer, dryer, the tub, any of our furniture. We found the back of one recliner is the only piece of furniture that we found.
Sandy's husband, Jim, remembers every detail of the tornado's wrath. There were trees in the basement, but the airport maintenance job he moved to Wayne, Nebraska for was about to drastically change.
Then we started coming up out of the basement, and I kind of looked over to the right, and something didn't look right over there. The 4-placed hangar was totally gone. It looked just like part of the tarmac out there. Looking around, we noticed that the new terminal was down, along with the 80 by 80 hangar. Everything was really a mess around here then. We went over to check on the 2 gentlemen that was in the terminal, and they came out. They were all right, too. One of them had kind of a sore back from getting hit, but not anything that he had to go to the doctor for. I went over to check on my vehicle, which was in one of the other spray hangars, and the wall had fallen on it, so it was totally gone. The airport is right next to Highway 35. So we walked up to the highway and tried to get some help. From there, I guess they called for an ambulance, and they couldn't get the ambulance out there. They weren't responding. The sheriff then took us up to the hospital, and that's kind of where I had spent probably another 2 hours getting stitched up. And I stayed with my son overnight then, and so we came back out here Saturday morning, and couldn't really believe what it looked like out here then, with all the buildings being down. I guess it was just start cleanup at that point. I crawled into the tractor, and we started moving stuff from everywhere that we could to try and get kind of halfway organized again. Looking around, the John Deere dealership is right across the road from us. They were totally wiped out. There was a Pacific Coast, which was a pillow mattress factory. They were totally wiped out. The storage units gone. All the equipment around is gone. The tractor that we had out here was a front end assist John Deere tractor with a loader. It was picked up, taken out into the bean field, not quite a quarter of a mile away, and never tipped it over. It literally picked it up and just took it out there, broke all the glass out of it. But the tractor was totaled out. We lost 15 planes.
James Wilson and his chase team made their way past the Wayne Municipal Airport, witnessing the damage that had just occurred from a tornado that was on the ground for nearly 19 miles. But he was about to come across the most startling sight of all.
We went through and saw that. There's John Deere combines and stuff that have been thrown up in the air. And then we're coming through town. We're one of the first chasers to get there. And there's a guy in the middle of the road. He's got a little bit of blood on him. He's flagging us down. So we go up to him and stop, and he said that his friend was in the ditch and badly hurt.
Alex Sheet, who had been storm chasing the day before, was out again on Friday, October 4th, 2013.
Upon coming to that much devastation and everything, we decided just to get out and help. I mean, anything that we could, really, because it was just a small town in Nebraska. That it was also a college town. There's a college, Wayne State College is there. Luckily, the college itself is on the north side of town, so it was not directly impacted by the tornado itself. But there was a lot of stuff in that town that did get hit. And then when we were driving through the highway there, people came from out of the ditch and waved us down. There's 2 people in the ditch that sought shelter because they couldn't get into a building in time.
One of the men who badly needed help was John Dunning. He's a chief information officer for Wayne State College. That October day started just like any other for John. It was business as usual.
I was in Chicago that morning, actually, with a number of colleagues. We were working on strategic planning for Wayne State at a retreat, and we had news of bad weather coming into town that day, and so we were sort of taking precautions. Ironically, part of my role is risk management, so we had done a bunch of work on some strategic planning documents, and so I said, I'm just going to mail these back to campus, because if we do run into bad weather, it'd be a really bad idea if the only place this lives is on my laptop. So we sort of got the documents distributed, and we all went to the airport and landed in Sioux City. I don't know, about 4:30, I suppose, in the afternoon. And I had driven into the airport alone because I'd come in from Minneapolis at the beginning of the trip, and everybody else had come from Wayne. But a good friend of mine, Michael Anderson, our vice president for academic affairs, and I were sort of first off the plane, and our luggage came off the luggage carousel, and I said, Mike, do you want to ride back with me? And he said, sure. So we told everybody we were going, and we jumped in my pickup and took off. And we got a call when we were about 12 miles out from his wife, who works at Wayne State, saying that a tornado had been spotted south of town, and we were putting students in shelter. And so the problem that Mike and I were faced with is that, the president of our institution is in a car behind us. Most of our vice presidents are behind us. We have very few executives on campus because we were all at this strategic planning exercise. So, we have our public relations officer and a couple other people in key leadership positions while the campus is going through a tornado lockdown. So, I floored it and called my wife and said, get the dogs in the basement. We're going to head to campus. And so Mike and I drove into town and we crested the hill east of town and looked down. Wayne sits in a creek valley. And so we looked down into town, and there was very clearly, a thunderstorm going through. It was really foggy and low-set clouds, but no tornado. So we come down the hill, and all of a sudden it starts to rain, and I throw my windshield wipers on, and then it starts to hail, and then the wind picks up really significantly, and then the rain just becomes torrential to the point where I can't see anything really. And so I slow down, and I knew at that point something was going on. This was a really strong thunderstorm that had come up so quickly. And so we're driving across a bridge on the creek on the way into town, and we start seeing pieces of building flying across the road in front of us, and Mike starts yelling, "We got to get out of here." And I start yelling back, "I know." And I clear the bridge and drive off the road into the ditch, and the windows of the truck exploded, and Michael bailed out, and I fought with my seatbelt a little bit, and I bailed out. And the next thing I know, Michael's standing over me saying, "Don't move, help's on the way," which is sort of the clean version of what he said. That's not verbatim. And I said, I thought to myself, well, I'm not hurt, but I am kind of sleepy, so I'll just lay here. Michael ran up out of the ditch and tried to get a hold of anybody because cell phones were not working very well. A couple of storm chasers passed by, and then another storm chasing team, Sheer Adrenaline, stopped by, and James Wilson and his crew, and they stopped, and they had some emergency management experience, and so they got on the cell phones, finally got through the hospital, which we were a mile and a half away from, and the ambulance drivers came out from the hospital, and it's interesting to listen to their story. They were so disoriented because none of the landmarks were there. The airport was gone. The huge farm implement dealership across the road was just in tatters, and so they literally had to flag the ambulance drivers down to where we were, and they got me into the hospital. The next thing I remembered in sequence is being in a hospital room, and there was a whole series of hallucinations that lasted while I was in a coma. But the nuts and bolts of it was that I spent about 19 days in ICU after that, and was in a coma for 12 of those days, and had, I think, 36 surgical procedures in those 19 days.
There was a block of time from the moment John jumps out of the truck until he sees Michael stand over him that John doesn't remember. John fills us in on what he has been told by Michael and others.
When I jumped out of the truck, I should have been, when you look at it logistically, I should have been west of Michael and a little further up in the ditch because I was on the driver's side and he was on the passenger side. What we think happened is I jumped out of the truck and got caught up in some barbed wire fencing, got drug about 20 to 30 yards through the air, deposited right behind Michael, just north of him, down in the ditch. And as he tells the story, he was hunkered down in the grass, and the leading edge of the tornado passed over us. And he remembers looking up through the middle of the storm to see blue sky and the air being sucked out of his lungs in that low pressure zone. And then he heard this really loud banging noise and looked up the ditch across the road, and there was an industrial dumpster being bounced along the road his way. He monkey rolls out of the way. The dumpster passes by, the trailing edge of the storm passes by, and he gets up to look for me by where the truck ended up, because we were still rolling when we bailed out. And he can't find me anywhere, and he goes back to where he was, and I was directly behind him, and the dumpster had landed on my legs and my back, and then had been picked up again, thank goodness, and deposited further north. Had fabulous medical care in Sioux City. I needed general surgery, obviously. I needed neurosurgery. I needed ortho. I needed plastic. And so we had just some of the best surgeons in Northeast Nebraska in each of those disciplines happened to be on call that night. So we had just fabulous surgical care and fabulous nursing care at Mercy in Sioux City. And then we started looking around. Well, my wife was doing all of this, actually, because my wife and my mom were taking care of things. To be honest, I was pretty out of it for about 6 weeks. So they're working with folks trying to figure out where we go for rehabilitation care. And Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital in Lincoln was one of the choices. And I had actually been to Madonna several years earlier on business, looking at some IT stuff that they were doing. So I was familiar with it, and I was awake enough that my wife could ask me for a nod if that's where I wanted to go for rehabilitation. And so I did that, and that's where we ended up going about 3 weeks later. And I spent about 3 months at Madonna doing rehab.
John said he sustained a compound tib-fib fracture that tore through the front of his shin. He had a broken left femur, a couple of pieces of wood embedded in his right leg, suffered a severed right artery in his underarm, a partially torn right radial nerve, a broken vertebrae, broken ribs, a concussive skull fracture, and a punctured lung. It was a series of life-threatening injuries that shows the strength of flying tornado debris.
And I think significantly for the town of Wayne, nobody else was severely injured in that storm, which was pretty miraculous. There was about $50 million worth of property damage.
He did exactly. The two people in that truck did exactly what you're supposed to do. There's a tornado bearing down on them. They didn't stay in the truck, which probably would have got them killed. They had got out, had got in the ditch, did the right thing, yet some debris got thrown by the tornado and just landed right on John.
Today, James Wilson and John Dunning are well acquainted. They become Facebook friends, and James likes to check in to see how John's feeling.
He's a great guy. There were a ton of people that ended up saving my life in ways great and small, and I mean that sincerely. We had people that cared for our dogs, and people that cared for our house, and people that my team at work that took up the mantle, being a person short. And I mean that very sincerely, that when you have those kinds of people investing that kind of love and energy into helping you, I think it makes a real and substantive difference in your ability to recover, whether you're directly aware of that or not. And so, I mean that. I think there were thousands of people that really helped save my life. And, of course, the folks at Madonna that helped me figure out how to live it again, which is a whole story unto itself. But the first people that were in that role of helping save my life was, of course, Michael Anderson, who, had he not been in the truck with me, I would not be here. And James Wilson and his team, who had the courage to stop and lose their tornado footage. And that's coin of the realm for storm chasers is the content that they get when they're out chasing. And they were willing to stop chasing a pretty good storm to help somebody out. And so I'm the beneficiary of that, and my family is as well.
Those that suffered the most on October 4th, 2013 come to the same conclusion. Sandy Hoffman had only been a resident of Wayne, Nebraska for 2 weeks. She and her husband, Jim, say they will never forget the outpouring of support received by those who barely knew them.
We have 4 kids, and I know the one daughter, she asked me, she says, Mom, she says, does this feel like home, even though you don't have a house to live in? And I said, yeah, it did, because we did have so many church people that came out and helped us. I know we had people that came to, of course, we were staying with our son and his wife. They lived here in town, and that's where we were staying. And I remember them coming to the house there and offering us quilts and towels and non-perishable food items and stuff. And that was very hard for me to take. It's a lot easier to give than it is to receive. And I know they kept saying, take more, but that was real hard for me to take. The community was very good to us.
Even though we was only here 2 weeks, it felt like home. I guess that the community has, since the tornado, has really welcomed us, and a lot of people know us that we don't know yet, of course, but it's one of those things. The community is great.
What the tornado blew away is the hardest thing to swallow for the Hoffmans.
The jewelry that I had in the jewelry box, I did find all of my rings except for my mother's mother ring that she had after she had passed away, I got that. Other than that, like I said, everything was gone.
Jim says the things that the tornado didn't blow away are nothing more than a mystery.
There was another recliner that sat about 4 feet in front of us. And after the tornado, the cement block that actually came over our head was sitting on the floor. That chair in front of us was picked up, cement block set down, and the recliner was sitting right on the cement block. You'd go over and sit on that chair after the tornado. It's just weird things that happen. One other thing we had was our 100 by 100 hanger up on the hill here. And there was a toolbox in there. It had a top box and a bottom box. And there was a box of styrofoam cups sitting next to it. And there's a little office to the north of that where they were sitting. The toolbox could not get through that door. After the tornado, that toolbox was in that office, top box sitting right beside it. The walls were gone from where the toolbox was. The styrofoam cups was still sitting there in that same spot, never moved. And yet the walls were all gone, the toolbox is gone. So many things happen that is just unbelievable.
For those that sought shelter and the tornado missed, it may have been a close call in Wayne, Nebraska. For John Dunning, the experience was life-changing. After a long recovery, John and his family were treated to a surprise welcome home parade.
Came home to Wayne January 10th of 2014, and the town had a parade. It was pretty amazing. It was a surprise to me. I didn't know anything about it. But folks were decked out, and it was an amazing homecoming experience. We felt, and I get teary when I talk about this, but we felt exceptionally blessed because the town really rallied around us beautifully in terms of people's thoughts and prayers, and my team up on campus and the rest of the campus community rallied. So really the only thing we had to worry about that entire time was recovery. And so my wife was by my side, and my mom came down and lived in Lincoln with us the entire time. And I'm a really firm believer that, especially after this experience, and you sort of have to go through a pilgrimage of sorts when you go through something like this, when you go through a trauma of this magnitude. And to greater or lesser extent, there are a bunch of folks in Wayne that have been through this kind of pilgrimage. I mean, people lost their homes and people lost their livelihoods, and so there's a fair amount of heartache that happens when you have a storm like that roll through. I'm just absolutely firmly convinced that we're on this earth to love and heal each other. So, sorry, I get a little verklempt. So we were the recipients of that in a focused, intentional way from people that's just absolutely amazing. Whether it was the folks at Mercy who did their jobs just amazingly well, or all of the community of Wayne that had us in their thoughts and prayers and took care of our home and took care of work and took care of everything, so all we had to do was focus on recovery, or the hundreds of people that sent cards, or the folks down at Madonna who just do miraculous work each and every day, and certainly did so with my family. It's miraculous things happen when people love each other that way. So that's been the beautiful part of the story that I've gotten to take away.
And the airport, it looks as good as new. It makes Jim Hoffman proud because just 10 months after being leveled, it was named Nebraska's 2014 Airport of the Year. We
were able to open up the airport in the first part of January with a runway, and we had a camper that we used for an FBO office. We had a Eurocoup convention in June. We had the airport totally open for that. So within 10 months after the tornado, the airport was totally open with fuel, electricity, everything, all the buildings up and erected. Our house that we lost, we had that back in 4 months after the tornado. It was a heritage home built right here in Wayne, just less than a half mile away from us.
Storm chaser James Wilson can't erase from his mind what might have happened if the tornado at more than a mile wide had taken a direct hit on Wayne, or worse, a bigger city. Everyone is thankful for what wasn't.
Amazing thing is this huge EF4 violent tornado was heading towards Wayne, and no one was killed. It's just pretty amazing.
For John Dunning, he now sees the bigger picture in life.
We're pretty good as human beings at when there's great tragedy or when there's great love. We're pretty good about being really good human beings, and I think fulfilling our purpose on this planet. But it's hard to stay in touch with that when there's not a siren's call to do so. And that's, I think, the great challenge in life is how do you continue to stay in touch with that phenomenal purpose each and every day? And so how do you stay connected with that kind of intentionality throughout your life? But I think that's why we're here. And sometimes you get opportunities like tornadoes or other tragedies or other triumphs that help you refocus on that.
Do you have a story about tornadoes you'd like to share? Let us know and you'll be featured on a future program. Just email us at jenanddan@tornadotalk.com. That's jenanddan@tornadotalk.com. Next on Tornado Talk, there's a debate about the future of storm damage surveys. With the ability of mobile radar, should that be included in the EF scale? The world's top experts share their opinions. What to do with the wind on episode 23 of Tornado Talk.